Hey y'all, this is my next installment in my series on losing my career and building it back up again. So those of you who've seen the previous videos will recognize this chart where time is on the horizontal axis and happiness is on the vertical axis. And we've talked about kind of this lowest point here, which happened when I was on my first job after finishing training. I'm going to share in another video how I turned things around. But before that, I feel like I need to share some of the things that happen to women, and in particular women of color, in our workplaces, and in particular in male-dominated workplaces. So I had been an engineer in undergrad and always been a huge fan of math and science, always at the top of my class. And I never really thought much about gender. I mean, I knew there was the stereotype that like women aren't as good at math, but it didn't seem relevant in any way because I literally was always the best in those classes. So after college, I went straight to medical school. And while medical school has a lot of issues, I did not feel, for me in my experience, that gender bias was a big part of that. So it wasn't really for me until I hit residency that I started to see how women were being treated differently than the men. And I think most women recognize this at some point in their career. Some people recognize it much earlier, and some people recognize it even later. So when I went to do my PhD, I ended up actually studying the stereotype that men are better surgeons than women and how that affects women as we're training to become surgeons. And I've spent the last, 12-ish years since my dissertation really trying to understand this. For example, we've published research showing that people speak about men and women differently in evaluations. They are more likely to use superlatives to describe men than they are women, for example. We also know that people of all genders don't really expect women to be physicians or to have careers. And so I, as a surgeon, could spend a lot of time with a patient explaining their problem, how I would fix it surgically, what the risks and benefits are, only to have them then say, well, who would do the surgery? Because they couldn't quite put it together that I would be the one doing the surgery. There are also some challenging dynamics between women physicians and women nurses, which honestly I don't have time to get into here, but we did write an article about it. So even though I was showing up to these spaces exactly the same way as I had to everything else before, in the same way that had led to success before, for the first time, all of that was met with disdain. And that piece did not get any better after I finished training. It actually got worse.